Avoidance is really never neutral. It's not. It's teaching you something about yourself. Avoidance is never free, right? The bill just comes later. Notice when you've been telling yourself the same thing for a long time. When has the reason been the same for, 6 months, a year, 3 years? It's really worth asking at that point, is this a reason or is this a story? The thing you're not saying is just like the elephant in the room in every other conversation that you are having. So you're talking about dinner, but the elephant in the room is right there, right? It's never going to go away until you have the conversation. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in today for a topic that maybe at first glance doesn't sound like one that is going to be a whole lot of fun. But I think as I've reflected on my notes for today's episode, this is good territory we're going to be in today. I think there's a lot to learn here that's going to be really enlightening and can create a lot of freedom for those of you brave enough to listen. So I'm going to start with what I think will be probably a relatable story for a lot of my midlife listeners, women who are in the same stage of life that I am. And it really is about me over the last, let's say, 5 to 7 years, avoiding something that I avoided for way longer than I should have. For a number of years, really more than a few, like I'm embarrassed to say, I was dealing with this sort of range of symptoms that I didn't really clock. And I had all the reasons to explain them away, like disrupted sleep, right? Why was I waking up at 3 a.m.? Lack of temperature control, like I would be really hot or really cold. General feeling of not running at my full capacity, like I just didn't have the level of productivity or sharpness that I was used to having. Few other things, mood dysregulation. And I knew, I kind of knew in the back of my mind what was likely going on, but I really was taking absolutely no steps to do anything about it. I knew I could make a doctor's appointment. I could probably get some testing done. I could probably talk to somebody who specialized in women's health and potentially feel significantly better, right? Keyword potentially. But I just didn't do it. I just didn't take any of those steps. I was busy. It seemed complicated, right? I told myself this will take care of itself. And I really convinced myself that I was managing, I was doing just fine. And also I think I was telling myself it just wasn't time yet. This was so manageable. I don't know what people are talking about. This is fine. I'll be fine, right? And one day I finally made the appointment and said, okay, look, here's all the stuff I have going on. And my sweet doctor looked at me and was like, you are 5 to 7 years later than you probably should be in coming in to have this conversation. We could have had you feeling better so much longer ago. And of course, I'm talking about all of the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause and this collection of symptoms that have gotten so much attention in the media of late, in the last several years. This topic has just skyrocketed. And I was privy to all of that. I had Dr. Lisa Larkin on this podcast talking about it, and I still didn't do anything about what was going on in my own body, right? And I think, honestly, I had heard enough noise about hormone replacement therapy that I didn't think I was a candidate for it. And that I just took myself out of the game. And I think the thing that finally shifted for me was I read Mary Claire Haver's book. Most of you have probably read it if you're in this season of life. And when I read it, there was a specific piece of the book where she was sort of debunking some of the bad press that hormone replacement therapy, specifically estrogen therapy, had gotten over the years. She laid out kind of what the science was, where the flaw in the data was, the research was, what the actual truth was. And that was enough for me to say, maybe I should talk to my doctor. Specifically for me, it was the belief that oral estrogen was probably never going to work for me. I wasn't going to be a candidate because of another condition that I have, but transdermal an estrogen patch would probably work. And so that was the thing for me. There was this little inflection point that got me over the hump to say, I'm going to go have a conversation. And of course, at that point, everything started shifting, right? I had the right combination of hormones coming back into my body. I was able to reclaim like a level of capability and capacity and energy and sleep that I just thought were gone. And I felt a whole lot better. Like in pretty short order, a lot of things kind of came back online. So the first thing that I thought when all of that happened was, why did I wait so long? Right? What on earth was I waiting for? And of course, I know now, like I could have probably told you then if I'd stopped to think about it, what was I waiting for? What were the things that were in my way, or the misconceptions or the beliefs or the stories I was telling myself that were in the way? But if you've ever said those words, like, why did I wait so long about anything? Then I think today's episode is for you, because what I'm going to talk about today is avoidance, the pattern of avoidance, not as, a character flaw, not as like laziness, but as a signal. Why is it that we avoid things? And we're going to talk about why it is that we avoid things. And also, we're going to talk about what that costs us and some of the other lenses around this pattern of avoidance. So I want to start for you today with a question. And I want you to just sit with it for a second as you're listening, which is this: what do you already know you probably need to do? Right? Maybe you're not saying it out loud. Maybe you haven't taken any action about it. You haven't journaled through it, but like you already kind of know, I need to do this thing. What is that for you? And when you have that in your mind, like I ask clients this question all the time. And what I've noticed is the answer never usually takes very long to surface. It's usually kind of right there, like just under the layer of busyness that we're all living under, right? Living under other people's needs, living under the general noise of our daily life. But that thing that you know you need to do, right? Or thing you need to say, or thing you need to stop doing or start doing, right? You're like circling around it probably without landing on it. But you think about it from time to time. It like resurfaces. That's avoidance. Right? That pattern, we have all kinds of other names for it that we're going to talk about today, but that really is avoidance. Like I already know, I'm just not doing it. And the reason it matters, the reason I'm going to dedicate this whole episode to it, is that avoidance always has a cost. Sometimes it's pretty quiet, right? Doesn't really like announce itself like, here is the cost of avoiding this thing. It just accumulates in the background while you stay very busy doing other things. And again, most of us know what is the thing that we're avoiding. We just haven't really been willing to go there yet. So today, we're going to talk about what that is, what it looks like, especially when you're in like this season of life at peak complexity. Everybody needs something from you. There's not a lot of time for yourself. And what usually happens when you stop avoiding. And that is really worth paying attention to. Okay, so let's talk first about what avoidance actually is. The mechanism of avoidance. I think most people do not call it avoidance. I would not have told you I was avoiding talking to a doctor. I just would have said I didn't have time, right? We call it being busy, or we say we're not ready, right? We're like waiting for the right time when things settle down a little bit, right? When we have more bandwidth. And look, I know you're busy. I know you genuinely are busy, right? And sometimes it genuinely is not the right time yet. But avoidance has this particular quality that's different from a legitimate delay, right? It tends to be self-perpetuating. It's like the right time never quite arrives. There's always another reason. There's always another delay. The thing just keeps not getting done. And so underneath that behavior, underneath that whole not doing, there's almost always an emotion. Something that starts to bubble up when you imagine yourself actually doing the thing. And for most people, there's like some negative emotion, right? Some version of discomfort associated with doing the thing. Fear shows up a lot here, or all the different names for fear, like dread and anxiety and discomfort. We have lots of names for fear. Sometimes it's like anticipation of a negative reaction. Sometimes it's the weight of the decision itself, where like something is genuinely at stake and you can feel the consequences of either making that decision or getting it wrong. that emotion, whatever yours is probably why you're avoiding. And again, it's not because you're a baby, right? It's not because you don't care. It's actually because you do. Right? You're running this calculation of like, is this worth it? And so the weight of that emotion is exceeding the weight of the benefit. And that keeps you kind of not doing it yet, not being ready yet. So avoidance hides itself. This is like the second big point I want to make. Avoidance hides itself in these euphemisms, right? It's what makes it kind of tricky to catch. We rarely will call it avoidance. We're not like, oh, I'm avoiding making that decision. That's way too direct. We say, I'm really busy. We say, I just need to do a little more research first, right? We say, I want to just make sure I'm approaching this the right way. Like I need to think about it. So we're kind of waiting for the right perfect set of circumstances, the right time, the right window of space. And the reality is that is never coming, right? That perfect moment is not coming. So they're not lies we're telling ourselves per se, because sometimes, again, we really are busy or we really do need more information, but that avoidance pattern will like cling on to the littlest shred of that and not let go. It's like it's really willing to claim that as an excuse, and then we can't actually ever do the thing. So one of the things I help clients do when I'm coaching someone is notice when you've been telling yourself the same thing for a long time. When has the reason been the same for, 6 months, a year, 3 years? It's really worth asking at that point, is this a reason or is this a story? Have I concocted a whole narrative around this to protect myself from doing this? And that does sometimes open up maneuverability for people to get started, to move forward. If they can see like, oh, I have been saying I don't have time about the same thing for 2 years. At some point in those 2 years, you had time. If you think about my story, I needed time to schedule and get myself to an appointment that was going to take under an hour. I didn't need a lot of time to go actually see if there was anything I could do about this. But it was really easy to say, oh, I'm busy and I don't have time, right? Or also to say, it's not that bad. This is totally manageable. I think we tell ourselves a lot, like it's not worth it. It's totally manageable. But what's maybe underneath that is, what does it mean if I make this decision? Right? What's the story I have to tell myself about? So we want to know the difference between a time problem and an avoidance problem. That's what I'm trying to say there. When I think about what we're actually avoiding, okay, sometimes we're not avoiding the thing itself at all, but there are like patterns of things that we're avoiding. And I think when we name these, it makes it harder to pretend we don't see them. I think you'll see yourself in one or more of these patterns about avoidance, and I want you to, because it'll get you freedom. Like if you can break this, crack the code on what kinds of things are you avoiding and why, there's a lot of room here for forward progress. So the first thing that I think we're avoiding are decisions. This is the biggest one. And I want to be specific. Like, I'm not talking about little decisions like, what are we making for dinner tonight? I'm talking about real ones where something genuinely is at stake. Like you have a career that isn't working anymore, but it feels too risky to leave. That's the kind of decision we'll avoid, right? Or there's a relationship that has needed a hard conversation for longer than you want to admit to yourself. That's the kind of decision we're going to avoid. Or there's a path that you've been on that doesn't feel right, but you just don't want to look too closely because you might have to admit that. Like, we will busy ourselves with everything around the decision and leave the decision unmade. More information, more opinions, more tweaking of little things in the same territory, right? I call this rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Like the ship is going down, but the chairs will be very well organized. And this pattern is so prevalent. I don't want to make this decision. I'm just going to optimize around it to avoid the thing that actually could make a real difference. It's a tough one. It's a tough one because decisions get framed as being hard and we don't want to make them. And actually, I think decisions are so powerful. When we do start making empowered decisions, it's a game changer. The next thing that I think we avoid are courageous conversations. The conversation with your partner about how you're really feeling. Not about the schedule or who's picking up the kids or what we're having for dinner, but like what's actually going on between you two. We will avoid that conversation forever, right? The conversation at work about your workload, about your compensation, about the fact that you've been doing the job of two people and no one has acknowledged it. We will avoid those conversations because we just don't know what kind of a quagmire we're going to get into if we start them. The hard conversation with like your kid, your teenager, that you keep convincing yourself it can just wait one more week. I'm not going to talk about this yet. All right, we avoid these courageous conversations, and the reason is very straightforward. It's because the imagined version in our heads of how they could go is like so terrible that it just surpasses the silence, right? The silence starts to feel like stability. Tolerating the uncertainty of not having the conversation feels more stable than the uncertainty. Like we assign certainty to how it's going to go. We're like, it is going to go terribly. And because it's like false certainty, then the only way to combat that is like just do nothing. And when we do nothing, we can't get the outcome, but we also don't have to face the potential negative fallout from that conversation. I mean, there are so many conversations left unsaid. Again, this comes up with clients all the time. I am forever asking, where do you need to go have a courageous conversation? And like people don't like it, right? It's not fun to think about that. But that building the skill to go have those conversations, to just get things out in the open is so powerful because the silence has its own cost. The silence builds resentment. The silence builds distance, and then the thing you're not saying is just like the elephant in the room in every other conversation that you are having. So you're talking about dinner, but the elephant in the room is right there. Right? It's never going to go away until you have the conversation. Like a real downer today. I promise this goes better than I'm making it sound like. So decisions are one of the things we're actually avoiding. Courageous conversations, definitely something we're actually avoiding. I think health interventions are things we're avoiding. People who I have coached over the years about their relationship with various elements of their health, relationship with food, relationship with alcohol, relationship with patterns of behavior, right? Like we allow things to fester. And I think we sometimes we know something is off and we have a hunch that we could do something about it. And we're like, I don't think I want to do the thing. I don't think I want to manage the tension of the thing I would have to change to get a different outcome, right? Sometimes it isn't even a behavior change that's needed, right? Like there's a medication we can take. There's some kind of other intervention that can happen that will really make a difference. I was mentioning HRT at the beginning. The women I know who've made the decision, and again, this is a very personal decision you're going to make with your doctor, whether you have or have not decided to pursue this. If you decide to do it, most of the stories, almost all of the stories that I have from clients and friends are positive. And there's not like a lot of efforting required, right? It's just taking a supplement through some kind of a format, a patch, a tablet, or cream, something that we're using. So that is not like a high cost intervention. It's not like, oh, I have to change my whole behavior or give something up. Pretty simple. And yet there's a lot of resistance. But when we're making health interventions, sometimes those require behavioral change, and we really don't want to do that. And so we'll just avoid the change, but not feel very good along the way, right? So the cost is just like feeling worse than you need to for longer than you need to. And I think confronting it head on and at least understanding your options is the power move. Another thing that I think we avoid, this has come up in some group coaching calls lately in like my communities where I'm running group calls, testing for children. So testing for developmental delays, testing for When a child is struggling with something like reading, with attention, with navigating social situations in ways that feel slightly off, parents often sense it before they're willing to do something about it or before they're willing to even name it. And so the testing gets deferred for all kinds of reasons, because the wait lists are long and it takes forever to get to a practitioner, right? Because we don't want our children to be labeled. And there's a lot of fear about labeling because the diagnosis feels like confirmation of something that we'd rather not confirm. And so when I talk to parents about this, about, you have this hunch that something is amiss, and there's this avoidance of confirming that hunch because then we're allowed to like pretend it's not real for a while. But the bravery, the courage that parents harness when they're like, you know what, we're gonna go take a look at this. We're gonna do the testing. We're gonna get the diagnosis. We're gonna get treatment, support, intervention, strategies, medications that open up that really weren't accessible before that, before you got, took kind of the brave move forward. That label that felt like it was going to be a limiter turns out to be like the door that you get to walk through. Like I could tell stories for days. I probably should do an episode on this about parents who courageously pursued a diagnosis of anything from dyslexia to, ADD to autism, that came out the other side of that with tools and practitioners and support that allowed their child to thrive. So I think that's another one of those pockets where I see us delaying, right? We're delaying health interventions of our own, decisions that we need to make, courageous conversations we need to have, testing for kids in some cases. I think sometimes we delay, we avoid like very pragmatic life administration things, like making a will. The number of people, I promise you, somebody listening today, maybe it's you, is like, God, I was hoping she wasn't going to say making a will because I don't have one. And when you learn how easy it really can be to get the first version of a simple will made, so at least you're protected and your kids are protected, you're going to be like smacking your forehead going, what did I wait so long for? Right? Because we make these things up to be harder than they have to be. Wills are a classic. I see it all the time. People are like, I just haven't gotten around to it. Another one, for people who want to start businesses, they get really hung up on like, how do I start an LLC and go through the mechanics of getting like a company name and a bank account and federal employee identification number, like things that just come with starting a business. They sound kind of scary, and scary is like too strong of a word. They sound like we don't know anything about that. I don't know how to do that. It sounds complicated and hard. And so same thing with like starting a will, these administrative things that just sound like, oh, they're going to be so annoying. We just don't do them. And then sometimes there's a price to be paid for having avoided that for too long. So when there's one of those in your world where you're like, I just need to do this, I just need to take care of this thing, that's another place where this avoidance pattern shows up. Okay. So what explains this behavior? Why do we do this? I do think that the emotion around it is one of the things. And I said that at the beginning. Like sometimes we're like, we have fear coming up or some kind of negative emotion. Sometimes there is a sense of this is just so complicated. It's too many steps. There's too many things to figure out. There's too much I don't know. It sounds really hard, right? And so I'm not going to do it because it's hard. And I think when I was talking about the will or talking about starting a business and the paperwork for that, it kind of goes in that category of you might not feel a ton of emotion about something like that, but you might feel like, oh, how would I ever know how to do it? And it's just overwhelming and it's difficult. And so I'm not doing it. And I just want to offer you this perspective shift. What if it feels difficult because you've never done it before? Right? It only feels difficult to you because you've never done it before, not because it's actually that complicated. Because often what happens is it's like unmapped territory. You don't have the map, but the people who are available to help you through it, it's just a normal Tuesday for them, right? If you walk into your doctor and say, I want to talk about hormone replacement therapy, they're like, yeah, I do this every day. If you go to an attorney and say, I want to make a will, they're like, yeah, I'm doing 7 of them today, right? Easy peasy. So getting yourself in the hands of somebody who has already walked this path, the neuropsychologist who is evaluating your child, they know what they're looking for. That's not complicated to them. They've done it 100 times. It's completely routine. So that gap between how overwhelming it feels to you and how routine it is to the expert, that's like the complexity illusion. Like we think, oh, this is so complicated, I have to avoid it. But in reality, it's just new to us. It's just new to us. So when somebody finally does the thing they've been avoiding, the first thing they often say is, that was so much easier than I thought it was going to be. It was so much easier. And then that's where you get the next sentence. What was I waiting for? Right? Because there's this relief that comes in. But if you let yourself sit with it for a minute, it's a little bit infuriating because you're like, why did I wait so long? I could have had relief from this thing earlier. All that time, all that weight, quiet kind of weight pressing on you for something that turned out to be very manageable. And I want to take a second on this because I don't think we do this math very carefully. I think we really think about the front end discomfort, right? Imagine like, I'm going to go have this courageous conversation with my spouse or a colleague or my kid. And I imagine how difficult that's going to be. We don't really think about what's on the other side. We don't really think so much about what is that helping us do. We also don't think about what does it cost to carry that for a long time. You know, to avoid. It's like the weight accrues quietly and then it's still there. 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, we have this thing that could have been addressed. So the resentment is building, you know, if it's a relationship where things are going unsaid. Or options are closing off because decisions aren't getting made. You know, time's passing. We keep waiting for a better moment. And like we miss our chance. We miss another chance. We miss another chance. It's exhausting. And I think that energy could be better spent on something that's moving you forward, right? Every day you avoid something, you're quietly reinforcing the belief that you can't do it. You're telling yourself out loud or silently, I can't do this, right? And that is like just chipping away at your sense of self, of your confidence, your self-esteem, your belief in yourself is just getting like eroded minute by minute, day by day, right? That this is too much. I'm just not the kind of person who can do this kind of thing. And that avoidance is really never neutral. It's not. It's teaching you something about yourself. Avoidance is never free, right? The bill just comes later. We are able to delay it by a little bit or a lot. So I think what I want you to take away from this episode is just to come back to where we started. You know, a lot of what we want requires us to stop avoiding the action that's going to be required to get there. If we want relief from medical symptoms, we got to execute the intervention, which means we have to have the time to make the appointment, see the doctor, do the thing, right? If we want a relationship to be better, we have to have the courageous conversation. If we want our kids to get on the path that they can be on, we need to kind of give them the support that they need. So whatever the territory is that you're like, I know the thing that I need to do or say or that has to happen, and I know I'm avoiding it. I want you to pull something from today's episode that you can use, like harness, to move yourself into action. Just ask yourself, what have I been circling? Right? Where am I rearranging those deck chairs on the Titanic? While the real thing I need to do is kind of the ship is sinking here. And that's your homework for this week, is just at least to be able to name it, to be able to say it out loud, even if just to yourself, and see it clearly so that you can start building the courage to do something about it. Before I wrap today, if this territory is hitting kind of close to home, I want to make sure you know what is coming up in August in the coaching circle. Our next masterclass is happening on August 11th, and I am teaching a live masterclass on emotional resilience. Think of this as the skills for moving through those uncomfortable emotions that are underneath avoidance, for one thing, like we talked about today, and other patterns of behavior. It really is like the next layer of the work is to understand, how am I going to dance with these emotions so that I can get forward momentum? And avoidance is one of the things we're going to tackle head on. So if this is a pattern that you see in yourself, this is a class that is definitely going to help. So remember, the coaching circle, I should say, remember, you may not know this at all. The coaching circle, every single month, we tackle a different skill that is sort of foundational to being able to live a really big, full life, right? And have the time and the energy and the capacity that you need to live that life well. And so these classes are exclusively for Circle members. So if you want to be able to attend, all you need to do is join the coaching circle. The link to do that is in the show notes. I'll make sure that it's there for this episode because I hope you'll join me on August 11th for this next class. That is all for today, my friends. Till next time, let's be brilliant.